The night is cold. A bell tolls in the distance, slow, heavy, echoing through a valley shrouded in mist. You open your eyes. The floor beneath you is not carpet. It is hardened earth. The air smells of smoke and damp straw. There are no phones, no streetlights, no electricity. Only the flicker of a torch outside, its flame bending against the wind. You stumble out into the darkness. The road is mud. The air is silent, too silent until you hear it. The creak of a wagon, the groan of an ox, the shuffle of bare feet. And then rising in the distance, through the fog, you see it. A castle. Its stone walls loom high above the land, its watchtowers glowing with fire like the eyes of a beast watching your every move. You are no longer in your world. You are in the Middle Ages. A world of kings and peasants, of knights and crusades, of famine, faith, and fear. A world where the church decides your salvation, where the sword decides your survival, and where the Black Death waits in the shadows. But there is also wonder here. Festivals filled with music, cathedrals so tall they scrape the heavens, stories of courage, love, and betrayal whispered by firelight. And now you have stepped into it. So let me ask you, if you awoke in the year 1250, would you survive until morning? Before we begin, I have one request. Hit subscribe right now so you never miss our journeys into history. And as you listen, comment the time in this video when you felt yourself pulled fully into the medieval world. Was it the toll of the bell, the side of the castle, or the whisper of death in the dark? Your journey begins now. Welcome to life in the medieval era, the world of castles and kingdoms. The fog begins to clear, and there it is, stone rising against the sky, a castle towering above the landscape, its walls like cliffs carved by human hands. Torches burn along its ramparts, guards patrol the battlements, their steel armor glinting in the dim light. For peasants in the fields, that castle is both a promise and a threat. It is protection from invaders, but it is also the reminder of who truly owns their lives: the feudal order. The medieval world ran on a system called feudalism, a pyramid of power. At the top, the king, ruling by divine right, believed to be chosen by God himself. Below him, dukes, counts, lords, men who controlled vast lands and armies, and beneath them, knights sworn to fight in service of their lords. At the very bottom, peasants, who worked the land not for themselves, but for those above. Imagine it. You are born in a small wooden hut, your parents peasants. No matter how strong, how clever, how ambitious, you will remain a peasant. Your life belongs to the soil. Your sweat fills the grain stores of your lord, and your children will inherit the same fate. Meanwhile, inside the castle walls, life is very different. Behind the gates, step through the creaking wooden drawbridge across the moat and into the courtyard. Blacksmiths hammer sparks into the air. Servants carry baskets of food and barrels of ale. Horses whinny in the stables, their hooves echoing on the cobblestone. In the great hall, long tables stretch beneath high wooden beams. Nobles in velvet robes feast on roasted boar, spiced wine, and pies filled with meats you will never taste. At the head of the hall, the lord sits in a carved oak chair, his symbol, a crest or banner, hanging proudly behind him. But the castle is not only luxury, it is war. Every stone, every tower, every narrow slit in the wall is designed for survival. When enemies attack, peasants from surrounding villages flood inside, huddled together with livestock, praying the walls hold strong. The castle is not just a home, it is a fortress, a statement of dominance, a reminder that power lives here.
kings and intrigue. While peasants bend their backs in the fields, kings and nobles play a far deadlier game. Theirs is a world of arranged marriages, whispered alliances, and betrayal. One moment, two kingdoms are joined by a wedding. The next, they are at war, swords clashing on the battlefield. Queens often wield power behind the throne. Eleanor of Aquitaine, for instance, commanded armies and influenced politics across Europe, her legacy echoing through centuries. Others lived as pawns, traded like chess pieces in dynastic games. At court, trust was rare. A smile could hide a dagger. A feast could end in poison. Power was fragile, and loyalty was often bought or broken.
Knights. The Iron Men. And then there were the knights. From childhood, boys of noble birth trained for war. First as pages, serving in the households of lords. Then as squires, tending to the armor and horses of knights. Finally, after years of service, they knelt before their lord, a sword touched to each shoulder, and rose as knights. Knighthood carried honor, but also burden. Knights were bound by the code of chivalry, loyalty to their lord, defense of the weak, devotion to God. At least, that was the ideal. The reality was harsher. Many knights were brutal mercenaries, their swords for hire, their armor gleaming as they pillaged villages and crushed rebellions. Still, tournaments gave knights a chance to prove their skill. Picture the jousting field, two armored figures on horseback, lances lowered, charging at full speed. The crowd roars, splinters fly as lances shatter against shields. Glory for the victor, humiliation, or death for the defeated. For knights, war was not just duty, it was survival, and sometimes it was the only path to fortune.
The peasants struggle. The castle towers fade into the distance, and now you step into the world where most people lived. No velvet robes, no golden goblets, just mud, sweat, and survival. Dawn in the village. The rooster crows before sunrise. The hut is cold, the roof thatched with straw that leaks when it rains. You rise from a sack of straw, your bed, covered with a thin blanket that does little against the winter chill. Breakfast. If you're lucky, a chunk of coarse bread, maybe dipped in weak ale. Milk, meat, or cheese are rare luxuries for a peasant. Hunger is a familiar companion. Outside, the village stirs. Women fetch water from the well, their buckets heavy. Children chase chickens or gather firewood. Men shoulder their tools and head to the fields. The smell of smoke, sweat, and earth hangs in the air. This is not just a morning. This is life. Day after day, year after year. Endless labor. A peasant's hands are calloused, their backs bent from labor. Sunrise to sunset, the fields demand everything. They plow, sow, harvest. Grain for bread, vegetables for stew. What little remains after taxes and tithes goes to feed their families. But the Lord always takes first. A portion of every harvest belongs to Him. Another portion goes to the church. What is left may or may not be enough to last the winter. For a bad harvest means not just hunger, but starvation.
Family and shelter. Step inside a peasant's hut. One room, earthen floor. Smoke from the cooking fire fills the air, blackening the roof beams. Chickens wander freely. In winter, even livestock may be brought inside for warmth. The family shares everything: food, labor, even the same bed in some homes. Privacy is unheard of, comfort is unknown, survival is everything. Yet, even here there is joy. The laughter of children playing with sticks and stones, stories told by candlelight, the sound of a simple flute at night carrying across the fields. Faith and fear. Life is harsh, uncertain, and short, so peasants cling to faith. The church dominates every thought, every action. The priest speaks of heaven and hell, sin and salvation. To question the church is unthinkable. Superstitions fill the gaps where religion cannot explain. A charm hung above the door to ward off evil spirits. Herbs tied with string to cure sickness. a whispered prayer before crossing the woods at night. Fear is constant, but faith, true or superstitious, gives hope. Festivals and escape. Not every day was labor and fear. Sometimes there was celebration. On feast days, peasants gathered for music, dancing, and games. Markets filled with color and sound, spices, fabrics, trinkets. Storytellers, jugglers tossed knives, and traveling minstrels sang ballads of knights and heroes. For a moment, the peasants forgot the weight of toil. They laughed, they danced, they lived. But the festival always ended, and the fields always called them back. Hardship without mercy. Peasants had little protection. If invaders swept through, they were the first to suffer. Villages burned, families scattered, crops destroyed. Justice was brutal. A thief might lose a hand, a liar might be locked in the stocks, and the gallows always stood ready. Life was fragile. A cut could turn to infection, a fever could take a child. The average peasant rarely lived beyond 40. And yet, they endured. They worked, loved, hoped, and left behind children who would one day carry on the same struggle. The peasants' lives were not written in history books, but without them, the castles would have crumbled, the kings would have starved, and the knights would have had no wars to fight. They were the unseen foundation of the medieval world. The power of the church. The peasant kneels in the dirt. The priest raises his hand, blessing him in Latin, words the peasant cannot understand but fears to ignore. The church bell tolls, not just to mark time, but to remind all who hear, God is watching. In the Middle Ages, the church was not only a house of worship, it was law, it was school, it was hospital, it was judge and jury. It was the invisible hand that guided or controlled every life. Faith in every breath. From birth to death, the church marked every stage of existence. Your first cry came with baptism. Your first confession whispered your sins. Your wedding was sealed before God. And when death came, a priest stood by to prepare your soul for judgment. Life without the church was unimaginable. To defy it was not just rebellion, it was heresy, punishable by death. Imagine living in a world where missing Sunday Mass could bring punishment, where not paying tithes, 1/10 of your harvester income, meant both social shame and eternal damnation. To be in the Middle Ages was to live in the shadow of heaven and hell.
Monks and nuns, guardians of knowledge. Far from the noise of villages, monasteries rose like fortresses of stone. Inside, monks in simple robes bent over manuscripts, their quills scratching on parchment. Candlelight flickered as they copied the Bible, line by painstaking line, preserving knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. Nuns, too, served as healers, teachers, and caretakers. Within convent walls, women found roles of authority rare outside the cloister. To join a monastery was to abandon worldly life, to trade wealth for silence, and to live in service to God. For some, it was escape. For others, it was imprisonment. Pilgrimages and relics. The faithful longed to touch the sacred. Pilgrimages led thousands across Europe, dusty roads crowded with men, women, even children, walking for weeks or months to reach holy sites. They came to touch relics, a bone of a saint, a fragment of the true cross, a vial of holy blood. Relics were said to heal the sick, forgive sins, or even save one from hell itself. The journey was dangerous. Bandits, hunger, sickness, but the reward was eternal salvation, or so they believed.
The terror of the Inquisition. Faith gave hope, but the church also ruled by fear. The Inquisition hunted heresy, the crime of believing differently. Suspects were interrogated, tortured, burned at the stake. Whispers of witchcraft spread. A woman with herbs might be accused of sorcery. A man who questioned a priest could vanish into the darkness of a dungeon. The church promised heaven, but often delivered fire, power over kings. Even kings knelt before the Pope. The church crowned rulers, blessed wars, and decided which lands were holy or cursed. Excommunication, the act of casting someone out of the church was a death sentence for power. A king stripped of divine favor could lose his throne overnight. In 1077, King Henry IV of Germany knelt barefoot in the snow for 3 days, begging the Pope's forgiveness. That is the power the church wielded. Hope beyond darkness. And yet, the church also offered light. It gave hospitals for the sick, charity for the poor, food for the hungry. Its bells brought comfort. Its rituals gave meaning to suffering. Its art, cathedrals soaring toward heaven, stained glass blazing with color, still stuns the world today. The church was both savior and oppressor, light and shadow, comfort and terror. Without it, the medieval world would not have existed. With it, the medieval world was never free. War, knights, and crusades. The drum beats, trumpets echo across the valley. Banners ripple in the wind, painted with lions, crosses, and dragons. On the horizon, an army moves like a living beast. Thousands of men marching, armor clanging, horses snorting, swords glinting in the sunlight. And you, caught in this world, cannot escape the thunder of war. The making of a knight. A boy of 7 leaves his family home to serve as a page in a noble household. He learns to ride, to serve at table, to polish armor, to recite prayers. At 14, he becomes a squire, carrying a knight's weapons, tending to his war horse, watching battles from the edge of the field. At 21, if he survives long enough, he kneels. A sword touches each shoulder. He rises as a knight, an armored warrior bound to his lord. The ceremony is noble, the reality is brutal. The battlefield. Forget the polished images of knights in shining armor. War was mud, blood, and terror. Picture a medieval battlefield. The clash of steel, the screams of men, the thunder of hooves. Arrows darken the sky before falling in deadly rain. The ground shakes beneath charging cavalry. Shields splinter, bones snap, banners fall. And when the battle is over, the field is silent, strewn with the dead and the dying. The myth of chivalry. Knights swore oaths of chivalry to protect the weak, to serve God, to show mercy. But many broke those vows as soon as the battlefield began to burn. Villages were pillaged, women violated, crops destroyed. The sword did not always serve honor, it often served greed. Still, in tournaments, chivalry lived on as theater. Jousting fields filled with cheering crowds. 2 knights charged, lances lowered. The impact exploded in splinters. Victors were showered with glory. Defeat meant humiliation or death. For peasants, tournaments were entertainment. For knights, they were practice for war. The Crusades, Holy War. In 1095, the Pope called upon Christian knights to march east and reclaim the Holy Land. The result, centuries of crusades. Tens of thousands left their homes, wearing crosses stitched on their tunics, believing they marched for God. Some sought forgiveness for their sins, others sought land, riches, adventure.
meant suffering. Armies swept through villages, burning crops, seizing food, enslaving survivors. To live in the Middle Ages was to know that war could arrive any day without warning. And yet, war also shaped identity. It forged kingdoms, destroyed empires, spread ideas, and built legends that still echo centuries later. The clash of steel was not just the sound of death, it was the heartbeat of the medieval world.
Daily life and hidden secrets. The rooster crows before the sun rises. Smoke drifts from a thatched roof. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls. The year is 1325, and life in the village begins. But what was daily life really like in the Middle Ages? Not the life of kings and knights, but the life of peasants, merchants, craftsmen, and ordinary people whose stories rarely make it into history books. A peasant's morning. You wait in a bed of straw, your blanket a patchwork of old wool. The smell of smoke clings to everything. Your house is a single room shared with your family, and sometimes even the livestock, brought inside to keep warm through the winter. Breakfast? A crust of bread may be dipped in ale. Water is unsafe, often crawling with disease. Ale, though weak, is safer. By dawn you are in the fields, bending, planting, harvesting, your hands blistering from the wooden plow. Work is endless. Work is survival. Food on the table. For peasants, food was plain and scarce. Bread, porridge, cabbage, onions, and beans formed the diet. Meat was rare, a luxury for feast days. But the nobility feasted in style. Roasted boar, spiced wine, venison, and pies filled with fish or fowl. At banquets, swans were served gilded in gold leaf, peacocks roasted with feathers reattached for show, and sugar sculptures displayed as art before being devoured. Hunger separated classes more than castles ever could.
Fashion of the ages. Clothing told your rank instantly. Peasants wore wool, coarse and rough, dyed in earth tones. Merchants and craftsmen wore brighter colors, showing off wealth through fabric. Nobles dazzled in velvet, silk, and fur. Sumptuary laws even restricted who could wear what, keeping peasants in their place. But even the simplest tunic hid secrets, small pouches sewn inside to carry coins, herbs, or charms against evil spirits. Medicine and misery. Illness was constant, and medicine often terrifying. Doctors believed in the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. To balance them, they might bleed you with leeches, or make you drink potions of herbs, honey, even ground up worms. The barber surgeon cut hair, pulled teeth, and amputated limbs. No anesthesia, only prayers and screams. And when plague came, the Black Death of the 14th century, it wiped out 1/3 of Europe. People fled cities, wore masks filled with herbs, or turned to desperate superstitions. None could escape the shadow of death. Entertainment and festivals. Life was not only toil and terror. Festivals lit up the darkness.
Villages gathered for May Day, dancing around tall poles crowned with flowers. Minstrels strummed lutes, jugglers tossed flaming torches, actors performed plays in marketplaces. In taverns, ale flowed, dice clattered, and songs roared into the night. The church frowned, but people needed escape. Children played games with wooden toys, hoops, and marbles. Adults gambled, wrestled, and raced horses. For a moment, joy cut through hardship, crime, and punishment. But the law was brutal. Steal a loaf of bread, and you could lose a hand. Accused of witchcraft, you might be drowned, burned, or stoned. Prisons were dungeons, dark pits crawling with rats, disease, and despair. And yet, justice was often public theater. Executions drew huge crowds, as much entertainment as warning. The message was clear: obey or suffer.
hidden lives. Beneath the surface of medieval order, there were secrets. Women who brewed herbal medicines, passing down knowledge in whispers. Outlaws hiding in forests, robbing merchants on lonely roads. Secret lovers meeting by candlelight, defying marriages arranged for politics, not passion. Servants who knew more of a lord's private life than the lord himself. Behind every stone castle and muddy village, there were stories. Some noble, some dark, all very human.
Castles and architecture. The ground trembles beneath your feet as you approach. Rising before you is not a house, not a church, but a mountain of stone. Towers claw at the sky, banners whip in the wind, and a drawbridge lowers over a dark, still moat. You are standing before a castle. The fortress of power. Castles were not built for comfort. They were built to intimidate, to stand high on hills, to loom over rivers, to remind peasants who ruled the land. Every part of a castle had a purpose. Moats, wide ditches of water making sieges harder. Drawbridges and portcullises, heavy gates of wood and iron that slammed down in seconds. Murder holes, small openings in the ceiling where defenders could pour boiling oil, stones, or arrows onto attackers. Arrow slits, thin gaps in the walls that let archers fire safely from within. To attack a castle was to fight stone itself. Life inside the walls. But castles were also homes, crowded, smoky, bustling with life. The great hall was the heart, long wooden tables, roaring fires, feasts, and music. By day it was court and council chamber. By night it became a sleeping hall for servants. In the kitchens, meat roasted on giant spits, cauldrons bubbled with stews, and servants raced to feed hundreds of mouths. Nobles had private chambers with beds draped in fine linens, but don't imagine luxury. Drafty walls let in icy winds, and even lords woke to frost on their blankets. Servants slept wherever space could be found, often near the warmth of the animals. Secrets in stone. Castles held secrets. Hidden passageways ran behind walls. Trapdoors opened into dungeons. Underground tunnels led to rivers or forests, providing escape routes in times of siege. And then there were the dungeons, dark, airless cells beneath the castle where prisoners were chained, forgotten, or tortured. Every castle had ghosts, real or imagined. The moan of wind through a tower slit could sound like the cry of a lost soul. Castles under siege.